Gita?
Hello, I'm Jennifer Skiba. My address is 26 Victor's Chase, Sugar Land, Texas, in New Territory. First off, I'm going to be reading a letter, though, from Kim Lincecum, who could not be here today. Her address is 6436 Hidden Crest Way. At the last meeting on December 14th, several people spoke about how we, the citizens, are uneducated about the shelter issues. While I may not be the most educated on policies and procedures and all the workings of an animal shelter, I have volunteered at several. I've been an animal lover, an owner, supporter, a rescuer, a transporter, TNR supporter, trapper, and releaser. I've worked for a veterinarian in an animal emergency clinic for almost 10 years of my life. I'm also a member of the human medical field. It seems to me that the question here should be, what is the best thing for the animals in our community? If we regionalize our shelter, we'll just be passing that responsibility on someplace other than to our own city and shelter. And we will not have control over what happens there. I believe this is not a good decision for the animals nor for our city. There should be no reason why Sugar Land cannot support financially and through volunteers a very successful shelter. Some negative things have happened there, but there's no reason why we cannot move on from this and get back to the business of running and taking care of our own shelter. With their new software, keeping up with the pets should be a lot easier by getting staff trained on the policies and make sure that they clearly understand their responsibilities and requirements should alleviate all issues or problems that the shelter has had in the past. I'd like to see us utilizing more of the approved fosters that we have in the area and then market those animals by having events around the area. I personally have a foster dog and I took to multiple events until we finally got it adopted out. We need to work with rescue groups on implementing low-cost spay and neuter for the community animals. I also think by adjusting and shifting the visiting hours at the shelter, people who work from 8 to 5 on a work schedule will have more of an opportunity to go and visit the animals after work. I've lived in New Territory for 19 years, and I know our neighborhood has been able to utilize the Sugar Land shelter when animals were found without any issues until just recently, when they started shutting down intake of animals at the shelter. With Fort Bend County Animal Shelter and Rosenberg Animal Shelter constantly full or overcrowded, they have nowhere else to go. And taking them to Bark in Houston is an immediate death sentence, as most of you are aware. My greatest fear is that we let our shelter become regionalized and it will end up very much like Bark Shelter. Let's keep our shelter in Sugar Land. I want you to start off that I also spoke with Sharon Hart of the James Reese Technical Center this morning. She mentioned that she has students waiting to get their opportunity to work with the sheltered animals and rescued animals, and she wants to give them a work-based option that will fulfill them when working with animals, and it will give them an experience that is second to none. It will help students gain much needed credits to graduate from high school and pursue a career.
Your
Okay,
time is up.
I'm sorry, but I think we need to think about outside of the box.
The next person is Georgina Mikado.
My name is Georgina Machado. I live in 15515 Truslow Point Lane, Sugar Land, and that's in Englewood Place. I have been a resident of Sugar Land for 35 years, and I have volunteered also at the shelter. And I'm here today because I've heard of the possibility of the animal shelter getting outsourced, and I wish to express my concern regarding this matter to the board. Sugar Land has been rated as one of the best cities to live in, but there is something they have neglected to mention in that report. Our city is unable to care for the animals in its community and doesn't feel has a moral obligation to do so. These animals belong to our community and we do have an obligation to care for them. The city is responsible for providing core service and the citizens expect that include care of the animals' inhabitants. So somewhere along the line, the city government has neglected to listen to the wishes of the citizens when we voted for a bond to build a new animal shelter. We clearly said by an overwhelming majority that we approved 6.6 million for construction of an animal shelter. This vote was not for the city to clean his hands off the shelter and give the problem to someone else by outsourcing it. Have any of our city council members and this board spent any time on the shelter? For such an affluent community, this shelter has been an embarrassment. While the physical structure of the shelter has long been an embarrassment, the heart and soul of the shelter's operation has long been a point of pride. It's falling apart and it is incapable of housing the animals of our community. Every few days now, our shelter is closed and unable to provide for basic animal services. What would happen if we closed the trash pickup because they were unable to pick up any more trash? Do you think the phones would be ringing off the hook at City Hall? So I am here to make the phone call for those that don't have a voice. I blame it on the city management for their lack of vision and planning for future growth. We know that other parts of Fort Bend would be annexed, and we failed to plan for the intake of these animals. That's why we find ourselves in crisis mode now. If the city wants gold standard for the other core services, why is it that it doesn't have the same expectation for our shelter? Outsourcing is not the solution, no matter how pretty and fancy a center you believe combining these resources can build. The scale of outsourcing is way too large. Surely it would be far easier for Sugar Land to handle its own feral cats and stray dogs than to send them down to the road to a place that houses hundreds of animals at the same time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Next, I'm calling Charlene Avery. And she does have a handout. I'd like to hand it out to the board after okay. We'll hand it out now.
Thank you. My name's Charlene Avery Turk. I've been here before. I live at 4523 Topaz Trail in the New Territory subdivision. I'd like to thank the city staff and volunteers for all of their hard work. I also want to thank everyone who showed up today in support of our Sugar Land shelter and our Sugar Land animals. I also want to give a special thanks to Dawn and Danny, who have been putting up with answering my many emails regarding the status of the pilot TNR program at First Colony Mall. I really appreciate it. I know that Dawn and Danny recently met with the mall manager as well as security. The latest update I received was that they were going to look into a screening process. They're still searching for a local vet to perform spay-neuter services and have a meet and greet. This is fantastic news, and I'm happy to see things moving forward. In the meantime, the community cat caretakers that have been feeding, providing care, trapping, and taking out all the kittens are still not allowed on mall property to continue their care. I've done TNR in my neighborhood, so I'm familiar with ways to do it. Cats are normally fed in a certain area so you can assess them and figure out where best to set traps. It is trapped, sterilized, vaccinated, ear tipped, and then put in a recovery room for at least 24 hours while still in the trap, and then released exactly where they were trapped. Trapping is an ongoing process. Just because you put out 10 traps does not automatically mean you will trap 10 cats. You don't trap until night before you have appointments at vet clinic. We have given staff information on vets in our area that work with TNR programs, as well as pricing. There are also several that you can sign up for in advance, such as Team Feral and Hope. I realize that getting a program fully implemented takes time. However, this is a pilot program that was started nearly 2 years ago. When the city of Sugar Land first asked for volunteers to help with this process, these volunteers showed up. This individual has extensive TNR experience and was instrumental in containing the cat overpopulation at the fountains. Here are the stats. The beginning population was 35. They're now 13. They're all spayed, neutered, vaxxed, and are aging out. No new kittens for years. Colony is stabilized. First Colony began at 100 plus cats. It's now at 2025. Volunteer trap pulled off kittens until she was banned. Number is growing and new kittens are already there again. One spayed cat kitten has 4 kittens average. Within 16 months, that number has multiplied to 36. Multiply that by 20 and you get the picture. In 2021, SLAS had 983 cats enter our shelter. They saved 612, but the save rate was still at only 62%. With the TNR program, the majority of the cats will not enter into the shelter system at all, opening up valuable space for other animals. The volunteers that have provided food and care for these cats have, for years, have been officially banned with threat of jail time. These cats have become dependent on food, and they depend on these cat caretakers. Please, I'm begging you, make the call today. Let at least one person, that's my ask, go back and feed the cats before they starve. It's just simply inhumane. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Lynn Harpham.
Hi, I'm Lynn Harpham, 4003 Brenner Court, Sugar Land. I met recently with Rob and Dawn, and in the interest of transparency, I wanted to share that with the board. I was really appreciative of their willingness to sit down with me. Also, even more pleased to find out that money is not what they're trying to achieve, saving money by going with regionalization. In fact, as other communities have experienced, the city understands that regionalization will actually cost more than current shelter operations. As always, I'm here to promote the equation as the only proven method of best practices for shelter today. In one equation area, rescue partnerships, the city has made excellent progress. Since Dawn took over in September, they've placed 147 animals in rescues, which is far above what the equation even expects or demands. In another equation area, foster homes, the city has signed up 130, probably more now, foster homes, which again is fantastic. There are issues with getting those animals into homes. And I think we need to meet or talk at least with people like Wilco, who have overcome these same issues and now house about half of their intake in foster homes, which means Wilco never has to close its doors. Wilco also runs a program where high school kids get volunteer hours for foster animals. So we have about 26,000 foster kids in our area. So I think we could do well with a program like that. We could also reach out to League City, which runs a day out foster program. So someone can just come get a dog for a few hours or a day, which relieves the shelter from the care, makes the dog more adoptable, and exposes him to more people. A third equation element is comprehensive adoption. We do have some events planned, which is great, but I'm wondering if we could find some offsite venues where we could place, like say, cat cages and things for constant viewing in the public. Also wondering about our online adoption services. I found some Sugar Land pets on Pet Finder, but I didn't find any on adoptapet.com. And I'm also wondering if we've reached out to rescuegroups.org, which will help us advertise pets on the web. The shelter hours have got to increase. That's part of comprehensive adoption. You've got to be open when people are coming to look for pets. A fourth equation element is TNR, which Charlene just very eloquently spoke about. I'd like to just repeat that we are already in a dire situation at the mall. It's not only inhumane, we're going to go back up to 100 cats very quickly, and then we're going to have a much bigger project on our hands. The fourth and final category, volunteers. We need more volunteers at the shelter, particularly younger ones. I'm wondering if we could work with the U of H campus to speak or share flyers. Can we also get into the high schools before the semester ends in May? Also wondering if we're doing any work to solicit expert volunteers, maybe volunteers who could apply for grants, volunteers who could help Jillian with listing pets as found on social media and also scouring the lost pet social media. Also, maybe we could solicit some volunteers with training skills who could help the shelter with much needed behavioral training. It might be most efficient to engage the free discrete services offered by Mara Hartzell, the esteemed previous director of Rosenberg Shelter, who now consults and did an unbelievably great job in Rosenberg. Every win that Mara might help Sugar Land achieve gives us a better story to tell, helps us win over the public, and invites resources to a very difficult situation. Thank you. I also have
Thank you. We have the handout, which we will pass around. Next, I'm calling Christiane Galvani.
Good afternoon. My name is Christiane Galvani. I live in Sugar Creek at 2926 Fairway Drive. And I'm here today as a concerned citizen wanting to raise my voice to join the chorus of those who want to keep an animal shelter open in Sugar Land. Fortune magazine refers to Sugar Land as the sweetest city in Texas, known for its strong connection to community and local services. It is named as one of the best places to live for good reason. What makes it so great is that our educated and affluent residents appreciate our outstanding schools, the airport, the Houston Museum of Natural Science, the Children's Discovery Center, the great healthcare facilities, restaurants and entertainment, the baseball field with our own minor league team, and the wide selection of pet-friendly hotels and restaurants. And of course, we have plenty of parks and dog parks. Dogs can feel welcome in Sugar Land. Even our city hall is dog-friendly. Bella isn't the first dog I've seen in this building. So it seems inconceivable that Sugar Land would not keep its own animal shelter, considering how negatively this reflects on the community. Overcrowding is a problem everywhere, unfortunately. But there are ways to mitigate this problem, and I believe that we are the best as residents of Sugar Land to address this here in our community, for us to be the ones to have control over the population of our four-legged residents. To help defray the costs of a bigger shelter, I believe we should require a fee for pet ownership, lower for neutered animals, higher for unneutered ones, maybe a discount for seniors, senior people or senior pets, and a microchip requirement. As of February 1st, the city of Houston requires pets to be microchipped, and the fine for not complying can range from $100 to $500. Why not consider something similar here? Young people who want to adopt a pet and who find a stray will want to go to a local place in their community, and there are programs that entice children to take an interest in animals. A reading program called Book Buddies has been a big success in other places. Children whose reading skills are lagging read to shelter animals, a mutually beneficial activity in addition to increasing awareness of the plight of stray animals and perhaps leading to fostering and adoptions. But parents or schools will not be interested if the shelter is some 20 miles away. This city began in 1828, almost 200 years ago, and has reason to be proud. An animal shelter belongs in a community as lovely as ours, and I urge the city to listen to its voters. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Pansy Chung.
So hi, thank you for this 2731 Country Club Boulevard. That's the address. Okay. Hi, thank you so much for letting me speak again today. I want to start by thanking all the staff and AAB members again for your dedicated work to the shelter. Today, I would like to put our focus on our foster program. I noticed that our shelter has been closed quite frequently for intakes. And I understand it's because the shelter is operating very close to, if not at max capacity. And from our previous meetings, I learned that the shelter has recruited more than 130 approved fosters since November. And this number is very impressive. And I also do understand that just by having approved fosters doesn't mean that they're all readily available. So I can't help but think, what else do we need to do to move the animals out of the shelter faster? With this question in mind, I would like to look at benefits of an effectively structured foster program. First off, by placing animals into foster homes, it pretty much increases shelter capacity instantly. It opens up space at the shelter for other animals, which directly increases the number of animals we can save. Having well-trained fosters also allows us to save animal populations that are difficult to manage in a shelter environment. This includes animals with minor medical issues, for example. They would benefit from recuperating in a calmer environment, hence making them more adaptable once they recover. Having a diverse foster program also can provide a break for animals who are already declining in our shelter. It helps the shelter pet acclimate in a more loving home environment, hence, again, making them more adoptable. Having a strong foster base also can prepare us to meet emergency needs when the time comes, such as inclement weather like hurricanes or extreme cold weathers, facility failures like power outages, flooding, or other emergency situations such as fire or a large intake due to hoarding or animal abuse. Overall, creating an effective foster program means more tax dollars saved and more animals saved, which is a win-win situation. It can also supplement budgets, enhance the city's imagery, and it increases overall agency effectiveness. With that said, I've researched a bit on how to structure a foster program that can generate successful outcomes, but I couldn't put it on a 3-minute speech. So I've printed out some short resource for you guys to look at. It's produced by American Pets Alive. I've also obtained some very specific guidelines from them, which I would love to share with the shelter staff or AAB members if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm calling Rachel Stone.
Hi, my name is Rachel Stone and I have residence at 2927 Garden Lane. That's in Chimney Stone. I would just like to first off say that I did not come prepared to speak today, but and I was under the assumption this was also about Fort Bend Animal Shelter. So real quick, I learned about the condition of a Fort Bend Animal Shelter just by chance, going down there to do a donation. And it was there that I learned about how the dogs were kept outside in unsafe and unhealthy conditions, basically just inhumane conditions. And at this time, there was a regular heat wave in Texas, and many of these four-legged souls were kept in cages exposed to the elements with no shade or other alternatives to aid with other types of weather that we've received in Texas, such as snow, rain, flooding, even temperatures going down to the 30s. This is no way to keep any of our friends here. So the small amount of dogs that were kept indoors still had no air conditioning. The staff there also seemed just as overwhelmed and overstressed as the animals. They were not only understaffed, they were overcrowded. And I will not speak about the Sugarlands shelter because I've personally I talked with many of the people at Fort Bend Animal Shelter. So I don't want to speak out of turn on Sugarland Shelter. I do know that I have stepped inside of just the front area, and I was able to see that the conditions actually seemed more humane than the Fort Bend Animal Shelter. So although we may not be here to discuss the Fort Bend Animal Shelter, I believe that all of the shelters need our help and our aid, and that we should be able to do that. I know that the Sugarland did receive a bond to receive a new shelter, and it is our responsibility as citizens and those that we have elected as our authorities to uphold those certain things that we've asked them to. Now, I have done just personally barely scratching the surface by reaching out to organizations up north to help mitigate our issues of overcrowding in these shelters. I've also passed on grant information to Fort Bend Animal Shelter. They received a grant of $150,000, which barely even scratches the surface of receiving a new facility, although it does help. So I believe that together we can help each other for the sake of the voiceless friends in our community. May that be the people that cannot be here today and our four-legged friends. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Diana Wright.
My name is Diana Wright Latham, and I live at 251 Cedar Elm Lane in New Territory. Everybody here that's had a presentation has really touched my heart, and I got emotional last time, and I'm sorry, but this is just such an important thing that we need to pay attention to. I've been seeing a lot of things promoting, since New Territory got this national coverage that, it's one of the best places to live in the country. They're enticing people to come here and, bring their families, start new families here, the new subdivisions going up everywhere and all that. But part of that family is not just the parents and the kids, but their pets. And one of the things that concerns me is, especially in some of these new subdivisions where they don't have access to the chains that some of these other neighborhoods have, we have a network within New Territory that to me is just beyond compare. Somebody loses an animal,
somebody usually finds it within 24 hours or less, sometimes 2 or 3 hours. And all the animals in the neighborhood are registered and where they live and who they belong to, because we're trying to reduce the problem of having to, people see something and they just take it over to a shelter when, if possible, they do try to find a home get them back to their home. We're bringing, inviting all these people to come with the image that Sugar Land is just such a wonderful family community. And I do believe it is. I'm a part of that community. I moved here 30 years ago and I have no regrets. But, somebody has to worry about the animals. I mean, it's really easy for something to happen in a new house. You have a yard man come, they're going to do some landscaping for you. They don't shut the gate. You got a new puppy in a new neighborhood. They don't know how to find their way back. And if somebody else finds it, and, they're trying to regionalize all this other stuff. Where are they going to take them? And who's going to bother to do it at that point? And it's really egg on our face if we're asking these people to come as families, without thinking that our pets are part of those families. So I strongly recommend those neighborhoods that don't have the kind of network we do to start it. I don't know who did in our new territory, probably Charlene, but it's very effective. And when somebody sees a picture of something, everybody jumps in on it. It just warms my heart to see that happen. I think that's one thing that can reduce the number that get taken over there. But it's only fair that we protect these animals, and taking this shelter that does need some help, taking it out of this community that's growing leaps and bounds just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. We're increasing our population. That shelter has been there forever when we didn't have very many people living here. And to not have something in our community as we're, trying to expand and, make this place seem like the best place to bring your family. I think it would be a real travesty to see us not have a place that they're safe. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
At this time, we will close public comment and move to item number 3 on our agenda, which is workshop. Item A, review and discussion of animal shelter updates will be given by Dawn Staff, Director of Environmental and Neighborhood Services.
Hello, I am here to give some positive updates on where we are at the shelter, and I think y'all will be excited to hear the progress that has been made. So animal shelter operations staffing update. We are almost. Oh, yes. We just go back, Thomas. Okay.
Or was that done? Sorry, everybody.
No.
You're doing great, Barbara.
Okay, so a staffing update. We are almost completely staffed. We've got 3 more that are in recruitment right now. So I'm hoping by the end of this month, we will be fully staffed. We still have the ability to utilize those RU techs that are temporary, but right now we are not, because we have our vet tech have started full time as of January 9th. I think that's right. Yes, January 9th. And then our veterinarian is as of last week, full time as well. I was planning to introduce her here today, but she is on vacation. So at the next board meeting, she will be in attendance and you can meet her in person. And so some benefits that we have seen in the short period of time of having a vet on staff part-time and then now full-time, we have implemented electronic medical records on all shelter animals. So there's no longer paper records. We've introduced adoption counseling by our vet tech for anyone who's adopting an animal. They get counseling on how to take care of animals. We've significantly reduced the disease prevalence. As you can see, there's no cats being treated with upper respiratory right now, which is huge for us. We have only 2 dogs being treated for kennel cough and only 1 active ringworm case. So significant strides on the medical side. Because we have an in-house vet, we are doing heartworm treatments in-house as well. So as of this calendar year, we have completed or in the process of completing 16 dogs. And that was as of February 3rd. We are also, because having a vet on staff, able to treat more complicated conditions in-house. So we're immediately seeing the benefits of having a veterinarian at the shelter full-time. And so we'll continue to see those benefits. And we've also decreased on the length of stay for kittens and puppies by adjusting that spay and neuter age. So spay and neuter, we've decreased our backlog due to partnerships that the veterinarian has in the community, as well as decreasing that age for spay and neuters. We are having conversations right now with Fort Bend Animal Shelter for a partnership for spay and neuters. They have a surgical suite. We do not. We have a veterinarian and they do not. And so we met with them earlier this month and we are working on an interlocal agreement to have that in place, which would allow us to take our animals and our vet would spay our animals and spay and neuter their animals. So that is huge for us. It would help us with the TNR program as well. So we're excited to get that going. That agreement would have to be signed by City Council and by the Commissioner's Court. So it's going to take some time to get that in place, but we are definitely working to get that done as quickly as possible. We have closed dog intake on 2 separate occasions since we last met, and it is currently closed right now due to overcapacity. The TNR pilot program I know is huge. So we did meet with mall management January 18th. We educated them on the reasons why we were starting a TNR program because they had no knowledge of the history. So we educated them on the history. We educated them on what a TNR program is. They had concerns and we discussed those concerns, and we're meeting with them again next week to finalize what they will allow the program to look like at the mall. And so once we get that meeting done next week and finalize those requirements and what the process will be, we will then meet with the volunteers who have signed up to do the TNR program. The mall security also wants to meet the volunteers. So he or she knows who's coming on site. We're also going to be drafting an agreement that all the volunteers will sign that will have the rules that the mall expects them to follow and the communication that will be required. We have a contract in place for spay and neuter. It's not in the city of Sugar Land, which isn't ideal. So that partnership with Fort Bend County will help us as well if we can get that done. And then we're also, thanks to Lynn, we are reaching out to a local vet, but they have not returned our call yet, but we are still trying. And we can transition from the contract we have now to a new contract at any time. But so that will not hold up implementing the TNR pilot program. So as I stated, so our next steps will be a follow-up meeting with the mall next week, and then the volunteers quickly after that, and then have that joint meeting with the volunteers and mall security, and then implement the program. The goal is to implement it by, I'm end of February, early March is our goal, but we are also subjective to approval by the mall. So we can push as hard as we want, but they have to approve everything that we are doing because they are the property owners. So we are working to get that approval as quick as possible. As of February 3rd, this is our shelter population. It has gone up. We just had a litter of puppies that was born a couple nights ago. So we're in the 50s easily. Adoption fees. So we have new adoption fees that were implemented on January 1st, approved in the budget process. So as you can see, the puppy and kitten adoptions are still like $150, but we've reduced the adoptions for the above puppy age. And then we also have the ability to request reduced fees for animals that have been at the shelter for a long period of time. And we continue to do that to help promote their adoption. We also have a new fee for microchipping. So we can now charge the public to microchip. So we will be creating engagement opportunities to allow the public to bring their animals in and we can microchip them. So that is a future program that we will be launching this year. And we're excited for that. You have a copy of the monthly reports, but they're up here as well. I know it's not easy to read up here. And I also emailed those out. So you have the December report, since we didn't meet in January. You have the annual report for 2022, and then you have the January of 2023 report. So on the monthly report, I think Susie, you asked a question about the lost in care. So the lost in care are our sleepover animals. That's how it codes it on the report. So they're not lost, they're just on a sleepover. And so that number, did y'all have any questions on the December report after y'all reviewed it? So we are continuing to utilize that best friends report. So the annual report as well utilize the best friends report. Did y'all have any questions on the annual? And both of those are already on the website, and we will post the January monthly report will be posted shortly after this meeting. And again, the lost and care animals are the animals that are on us or were on a sleepover when we created the report. So SOPs and policies, we have been busy modifying current SOPs, creating new policies and procedures. Our veterinarian has been creating some medical policies and procedures. So we will be engaging with the subcommittee to review and walk through all of those changes. And then those changes will then come before the board for review as well. So I know we have each subcommittee has 4 board members on it. Dr. Cox and Marion were on this subcommittee, but no longer will be. So we only have 2 on it. So my question was, does one other board member want to join on that subcommittee? John? So if everyone's okay with John joining that, we will add John to that subcommittee. So after this meeting, I will send out an email getting dates that we can meet. The more often and longer that we can meet, the quicker we can get through them and get them reviewed. So we will be going through that and then bringing it back again to the board meeting. So whatever we get done in February, we'll bring to the March meeting and then just continue that going forward until we're good to go. Any questions on the community engagement piece? I don't know if you've noticed that is a separate presentation by Jillian. I'm letting her speak for what she's doing. So she'll give more information on adoption events and that kind of thing. But
what concerns does the mall management have about the TNR? What did you get from them that they were concerned about?
So their concern is visibility and the time that the trapping will take place. They have preferences, and so we'll be talking to them about those preferences and if they will or won't work, because it's all subjective to the veterinarian who's going to be doing the spay and neuter, where, if it's a Tuesday, then we have to trap on Monday night. So we'll be walking them through what that looks like, and then see kind of what concerns they still have. They didn't know the history and why we were even starting the program, or that we had started the program. So that was just a huge learning curve for them. And then they have concerns about where they don't want us to trap. And so they're going to be giving us a map of where we are not allowed to place traps at. So those were the high level concerns, but more of just a lack of knowledge of what TNR is and what and why there. Yes, we're so close. Trust me, I want it done before kittens blow up. So yes, I agree.
Can I make a comment about shelter operations?
Sure.
Since that's a positive comment.
Yes.
For those who might not be there, I'm there a few days a week, so I do see what's going on with the staff, the animals, I mean, to some extent, obviously, but I just wanted to put out there that how impressed I am. I know we have only, quote, interim managers, but I am extremely impressed with the way the shelter is currently being run. number one, it's run like a business, which it needs to be run. And if the people don't fit in the jobs they're in or don't do their work or whatever, they're not keeping their job and they're putting good people in the positions. The shelter is clean. We can ask anybody from the top all the way down to a kennel tech about a dog, and they can usually answer our questions and they know what's going on and they care about the animals. And we can take a dog out for a walk and their kennel might be poopy when we go out and it's been mopped clean when we get back with a new blanket and fresh water. And we haven't seen that in a couple of years. I don't worry when I leave that somebody is not going to walk through at the end of the day to make sure every dog has water and they're not locked in or out where they're not supposed to be. And it's just refreshing that our managers are just doing a great job. And Jillian, our volunteer, our community engagement person, is doing a great job. The volunteers feel valued, and I think we feel good. And I just, as long as I've been at the shelter, which is many, many years, it's nice to see it being run well again. So I just wanted to put that out there in case anybody has any concerns of recent days, that, you know, that I'm very happy with it.
I'm glad to hear that. And that is a testament to Danny and Cindy and Jillian. I lost Jillian in the crowd, Jillian. So yes, appreciate everything that they've come in and done, and they've taken us to a level where we should be at and we'll continue to stay at and grow. There's more coming, like always progressing. Who else? Oh, sorry. Did someone else? I thought so. Okay.
No, thank you. That's all good news. Thank you very, very, very much. We all really appreciate that. That's incredible hard work. Just a question off that, just because I went to Wilco County to look at their shelter since 2 of our city councilors did, just to kind of see what they had liked. And I think part of it had to do with having, I don't think regionalization was the reason and the answer. The fact that it was well run by a good director who utilizes best practices, which it sounds like that's where we're going. And so thank you for all of that hard work doing all of that. But that seemed to be what made that place stand out. But they did have some good ideas there. I know I emailed you.
Yes, I appreciate your emails.
But one of them, because, okay, I know we all agreed to increase adoption fees. We thought it was good. Like, you shouldn't just be able to go in and take one off the street. Everybody should, if putting some money down makes them feel valuable. And so we made that decision, and I feel like that was the right decision. But when I went to Wilco, they had only 40 cats because they've been doing TNR for a long time, but they had 160 dogs in the building. When people have toured League City, they're over on dogs. Every shelter that I looked up in Texas is over on dogs. It's not closed to the public. And I believe it's across the US as well. It looks to be something to do with inflation and just the economy, but it's going to be a big problem. So just having said that, with that and it being spring, if we could work more urgently on the foster situation. I know taking time to ramp up, it makes sense because you guys started out with a blank slate, which was the right thing to do, but now it's spring and there's a countrywide foster problem with dogs. Oh, but one of the specific reasons I asked is Wilco worked with Best Friends. They had a press conference to say they had too many dogs, and Best Friends chipped in on the adoption fee so that the adopters only had to pay $10. Since we now partner with Best Friends as well, would Best Friends do something like that with us?
We can definitely talk to them. We also, even though we have those approved fees, we can waive fees still, and we can reduce them. So that's something that we'll be talking to in creating that program. You know, is it after an animal's been here so many weeks or so many days, we then reduce their adoption rate by half? But absolutely, like we can have conversation with best friends to talk about that type of program.
Wonderful, thank you. I think Misty, and she's happy to give advice. I think they were doing it particularly for a medium and large size dogs. Which
The ones that
seems-
don't move as quickly. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Small ones are out. It's the large ones. Yes.
Yeah. And the other question, yeah, just everything was right. And this was something that I emailed, but also something that had come up. Could we, because we have such a new, everybody on here is kind of new to the actual running of the operations. Is there any way that we could bring in Mara as because she's now a consultant, since she ran Rosenberg with a 95% save rate, and she's now a consultant with an organization that she has a grant so that she could consult for free, and it would be private. Nothing would have to go out that we didn't want to go out. So is there any way that we could please just I'd just like to get best friend's advice, her advice, just use all the experts that we have in our community, just to make sure that we are the best in our community.
Yes, I discussed your request with leadership at the shelter. And so we are going to schedule a meeting just to have an introductory meeting. Correct. Yes. So we are.
This is the best meeting. Thank you so much.
Happy. Oh, happy things. Any other questions?
John, what is the background of the vet tech? And is she on the roster to be paid, or is she volunteer? And what's her expertise of being a behavioralist? Or
I'm glad you brought that up.
Oh,
Okay,
no.
so she is a full-time employee. She came to us from Brazoria SPCA, which is where Dr. Carolyn Bender came from. So she's been the vet tech with her for multiple years. And so she is now with us. We are actually going to be starting having our animal services officers go through the behavioral certification training. Our goal is to have one officer go through it this year. We used to have that in prior years past. And it fell off at some point. So the goal is to have all of our officers behavioral trained and certified, because then you have multiple people that are looking at that will help us with behavioral programs and in-house assessments to again not have to take them somewhere or wait on someone else who can find time to come. So that's our goal, and we'll be working towards that.
that's great. Thank you. That's really thanks.
Any other questions?
Okay, if there are no other questions, then we will move on to 3B of our workshop. And Rob will be presenting that.
Well, Happy New Year. I don't think we met last month, so please let me say Happy New Year. So a couple things on the go back one, the Animal Shelter Partnerships update. We kind of got stuck when we left. We last met with you in December. We broke for the holidays, and then we came back in January and we canceled the meeting. The reality was we hadn't made much progress. Everybody was still coming back from holidays. Staff was still coming back from holidays. We started having phone calls with the best friends and trying to get meetings set up with SPCA to look at it from a nonprofit side as well and get their feedback. And then the tornadoes happened and everybody kind of rushed to go help Pasadena and everybody else, which is perfect. That's what they're set up to do. So we're still trying to get momentum built in that arena. So we haven't had any meetings with the SPCAs of the world. We did get some luck in setting up a meeting with best friends just from and I think we'll be meeting with them Friday, from what I understand. But they're more of the research arm, understanding, do they have research on regionalization, good and bad? What are the do's and don'ts? What are the results befores and afters? And really just trying to understand what they have from a research standpoint. Meeting folks with like Lynn this past month as well was very helpful for us to kind of understand more of where she was coming from and her perspectives. That was extremely helpful. So thank you for coming to lunch with us that day. So that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of the update for this month, if you will. is we're still trying to get some traction and getting meetings set up, but as those come up, we'll keep you in the loop as we move forward. We do have some additional things I think Dawn and I were wanting to do. One of the things that we do hear and listen to folks, either they email in or we see it. I mean, I'm a resident of Sugar Land, so I see it on my social media feeds and stuff like that, on Nextdoor and stuff like that. But there's a lot of conversations happening out there. Some of the things that are said aren't quite true. And so we kind of want to make sure that everybody kind of gets that information and hears it, if you will, at the end of the day. But the discussion on animal partnerships, it's not a overnight decision. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. All that stuff will be brought back to this board. You'll have the same presentation that will be given to this board, will be given to city council at the end of the day. It's a council decision of what we do as we move forward. But this board provides input into that as we move forward. But there'll be research that goes involved into it. There's a recommendation that comes out of it. There's what does this actually mean? Do we still have a shelter here and still be regional? Does it go somewhere else and it still be regional? What does that actually look like? A lot of that stuff are things that we need to talk through. I think some of the assumptions is it's outside of the city limits. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. You could have regional shelter within the city limits. The contract terms, the level of service, all those things are things that we would talk about as we move forward. We're just not there yet. Dawn and her staff and the Sugar Land folks have done a great job getting the shelter back. And, if you recall some of the meetings we had September, October-ish timeframe, we were in a totally different place as to where we're at today. And so a great amount of work and effort has gone into getting us this far. And that's the last thing we want to do is slip back from that. So I don't know if there was anything else that, Dawn, that you think that we need to provide an update on.
No, I did. I don't know which speaker it was, but they talked about if we regionalize, we wouldn't have a say of how our animals are treated. But every shelter is required to have an advisory board by state law. And if our animals are going to a regional shelter, we would have a seat at that table as well to know how that shelter is operating. So if we go that route of partnership with an outside entity who takes it over, we're still going to know and have a say in how the animals are treated and what their policies and processes are. So it's not hands off. We've regionalized or partnered. We're still at the table. I think that was the only thing I heard from public comment.
And the other thing, I think time frame has come up in different posts that I've seen so far. That's still kind of flexible. There isn't I've got to have a decision by April or a decision by March. No, we'll have a recommendation once we finish our work. And so we're kind of letting the work drive the schedule. If for some reason things in the region go crazy and we have an active hurricane season, that's going to delay things because people are busy doing things. And so, or if we need just, we get into discussions and we need some additional research in an area, that we're going to stop and go do that due diligence at the end of the day. So we're kind of letting our workload, if you will, guide the schedule as we move forward. And so that I know that was another topic out there for discussion at some point. What else? Go ahead.
It sounds like right now we're not to a point where we are, for instance, asking the same questions of multiple organizations. It seems like we're more in a learning mode. Is
Absolutely.
that true?
Absolutely.
And sometimes when presentations are finished and it comes here, and then at the next month or the next council meeting, it's being approved there. It moves very fast. Will there be opportunity for us to know the questions or the comparisons that are being made, some information that would allow us, as you are making a presentation, to form our own assessments or buy into the things, the presentation that you're creating, instead of letting it go to the end when you're asking us for an approval?
Yeah, no, as we get those things, we'll I'll be more than happy to bring them to you and give you an update, put them on the board.
Thank you.
I think it would be nice to have one of the members of the board on some of these meetings just to hear for us, and we can report back to our own at that point. Just to hear what is being discussed, because we really don't know what's being discussed when you're talking to these people. I have no clue what you're discussing.
Right, right. And the
So-
reality is we haven't got to that point
Yeah,
yet. And
okay.
that's why we as staff are here. I mean, we do that work. We report back to y'all as the board. And so that's kind of how we do things for the most part. Staff does the operational type stuff.
I think Robin has a great idea, though. I think just we would feel a greater sense of transparency as a community if a member was working with you guys on the research. And part of the meetings.
So that's something that typically we don't do, but it's something that we can think about as we move forward.
Yeah,
John?
one of the things that I've been concerned about for quite some time is the capacity of the shelter that we have.
Right.
And recognizing that even if the bond money comes through and we have to do the 2 or 3 years worth of planning and construction,
Yeah.
we have a period here from this year through 2026 that the construction won't have happened. We'll have the facilities that we have, unless we take some steps to augment those facilities now. If we delay doing the analysis of what that would take, what is it that we need to cover the next 4 years when we don't have bond money, we don't have a new shelter, and we're talking about, do we outsource or do we keep it here? We have to know the analysis of what it takes to keep it here. To keep it here and not do a first-class job is not an option. To do a reasonable job, we need to have staff analyze that alternative of keeping it here and covering the next 4 years. And we can't postpone doing that analysis until we do all of this other outsourcing discussion, or then we miss every year, we miss the budget. We're going to have to get some city money to upgrade the facilities in the meantime, I think. And we need to know what it is we need, and can we do that? And can we do it while we're having these other discussions? Without this information, all of our wanting to have the shelter here is not quantifiable, and we need to do that.
Yeah, no, and I think you hit on a good point that I failed to clarify as well. The decision around these partnerships, whatever that turns out to be, I think we have recognized internal that same thing of you have a gap of a time, right? And you need to understand what happens in the interim and then what happens ultimately. And so those are the things that when we come forward, we will be laying out as far as what is the interim plan in the short term meaning year, 2, 3,
Am I right
whatever that
that
case might be.
The budget happens
And
in
then move forward.
October. Is that right?
So the budget gets filed in July.
In July?
And then what happens is in July gets filed, city manager will file it in July.
Okay.
During the month of August, every Thursday typically, as in years past, every typically 7:30 in the morning, every Thursday in August, we'll meet in this room with council and we go through portions of the budget at that time.
And I think that staff doing the analysis to tell us if we have a way of covering that 3 or 4 year period without regionalization is something that has to happen between now and July.
So a couple things real quick. And so I just want to finish that cadence. So in August, we workshop portions of the budget with the council. So one morning we might be covering utility fund. The other morning we might be covering general fund, which is where animal services lie. The other days we might be talking airport funds and some other things, but it takes us the entire month to workshop it with council. And then we take it to council for approval by the end of June, July, August, September, and it becomes effective October 1. October 1 is our new fiscal year. So September 30th, the old fiscal year ends, September 1, the new fiscal year starts.
Right, and you can't go to council to get approval for things unless all
Afterwards.
of this pre-work has been done.
Yeah. And so what happens is typically by to meet the July filing deadline, there's a lot of budgetary planning meetings that go on with internal departments here at the city. That you'll typically kick off February, March timeframe. So they'll start to slowly start ramping those meetings up internally, start to create the budget. And then by July, it'll be going to council.
Okay,
So-
to make my opinion clear, we've cut back on intakes because we don't have space, or we've set a number that we're trying to stay with. I don't know that would fairly cover all the animal needs in the area to keep cutting back to a nominal number. And what happens to the other animals that don't get in? So to do something halfway isn't good enough. We have to figure out if we can do it properly. And then if so, then keeping it in the city is an alternative. If we cannot do it properly, that's not fair to the animals.
Got it.
I want to support John's comments. I think that we know that our April through July timeframe is going to be puppy, kitten, high shelter need date. And it seems that we have, with the number of close to intakes we've had now, when we're not in a busy season, that those are all going to increase as we get closer to that spring number as we get closer to that spring season. And so it would seem that maybe there's opportunity for an analysis of short-term, kind of an interim then, and then a long-term plan. I think what we keep coming back to with John's comments here is we have a certain capacity in the shelter. So we have a certain number of humane housing units that are available for animals. But is that the right number based on the things that are occurring in the community? And do we need to increase that number in some way, whether it's, in the past, we've added a building. And I'm not suggesting that that's the answer, but I'm saying that there is a need for somebody to be able to look at numbers and determine whether we do need to do something instead of just waiting for a long-term decision, which is regionalization or building our shelter. And I agree with him that we don't have a good feel for whether anybody is doing that or whether, and certainly that our board knows where we stand with that.
So I will, if you recall, we kind of touched on this topic about a year ago, probably. It's not, we can't just go add space, right? Because it makes sense, just go add 10 more kennels. Well, you go add 10 more kennels, you've got to increase the number of staff to do that. You can't continue to add capacity and ask the staff to continue to do all the other good work that we're doing and add it in the additional capacity. The good work that we're doing is a result of them being able to manage the population. The strategy of closing doors when we get to a certain level is there from a protection standpoint to give staff the time to do what jobs they're supposed to do at the levels they're supposed to do and do all the other things that you've asked them to do with the TNR stuff and the foster programs and everything else. We want to maintain that level. We don't want to decrease that just to add in some additional animals and makes things that much harder for us to be successful at the end of the day. So that was one of the strategies that we talked about a year ago. You're seeing some of it play out today. The size of the shelter is something that we need to figure out as we move forward. Currently, we know what we can do today with the number of staff that we have, with the number of services and programs that we offer. We know what that looks like. We know I bet we can probably go back and figure out when the peak season starts and when it comes back down, and how are we going to react during those scenarios. But the reality goes back, I think, to Jenna was talking about earlier, and a lot of the speakers we're talking to was the foster program. The more we can get the community involved in helping getting animals out of the shelter, then we can get more of those to come in and open up the doors. The downside to it is we're not seeing enough of that. And that's why you're seeing the shelter closing the just to dogs or just to cats is because we need help in relieving those areas too. There again, we want to make sure that we're not putting undue pressure on staff or volunteers to try to increase the number of animals we got. And the last thing we want to do is start stacking them in the hallways, right?
No.
And
we
so
definitely don't
that's
wanna
not
do
what we
that.
want to do. I'd rather, go along with Dawn's recommendation at the end of the day of, hey, let's manage what we take in so we can maintain that high customer service level that we're all.
But I
looking for.
think that there's another element to that analysis, which is if you need more foster interaction,
Mhm.
or you need more people
Adoptions.
to come in or whatever. So at what point? So we've talked about what is the capacity of our shelter. We
Yep.
know how many large dog runs we have.
Absolutely.
Those are not going to change, and we're not suggesting that we start building a bunch of housing units to
Temporary.
just hold animals, but rather do some kind of analytical, do an analysis that shows us, okay, we anticipate that in April, we're going to increase by this amount. And that's the point at which we have to
Ramp up.
have fosters ramped up, and we have to have a notification system or an interaction, some kind of communication in place or whatever it is that you're going to come up with to increase the interaction. You said there needs to be more communication back and forth between them so that they know what your needs are at the shelter. So whatever those things are, we're not suggesting just solely take in more or build more housing, but rather for us to all know what we're working with and whether the whole system is at capacity or not. And if we're just going to hand over or regionalize whatever exists at some point, then we're still not doing justice, because that's going to be a static number that you're going to base contracts and things on at a point in time. And I think what John's suggesting is that, or what I see as the work behind what he's suggesting, is for us to look at that the total the need
for
from the
service.
community. Yeah, the need for service.
The need for
And
service is something that's beyond our control to a large extent. If the need shows up and can be planned for, we have to plan for how we react and do something. And planning at that time is too late. We need to plan now.
And I don't think that, a municipal animal shelter was never, the state laws were never created to mean that a city or a municipality is responsible for every single animal inside its area, that they're responsible for keeping them forever until you find adoptees. The whole thing is, the whole premise of animal sheltering is to get dogs out to their homes, their adopted homes, and cats too. But I think whatever those things are that need to be improved, so that when we get to those points, we're not just continually telling the public we're closed, and then they don't see that there's activity going on by staff, by the board. If we're analyzing where we are and what that service level is, then we can speak to that. And we can speak to, we're at capacity at this service level, but certainly we could partner with other organizations, or other activities could take place that would help us with all that.
No, and if I hear you correctly, you want us to kind of look into doing a little bit of a better job on ramping up that communication as those thresholds start to get there. So it doesn't become this, it's Monday and we're hitting the button saying we're shutting the doors on dogs
And
because of this.
specifically, if we, in the process of addressing these things, we need to go to the city for funds.
Yeah.
That we can't miss the deadlines for how do we apply for those funds. We need to be able to justify to the council, why we're asking, how much we're asking for, and we have to not miss deadlines, because otherwise we go another year.
No, and I agree. I mean, Dawn's got pretty good about asking for that, even if it was a mid-year deal. So I'd expect her to continue to ask as the need arises. So,
And
But yeah.
again, I would just say that I don't want to say that it's only communication. What are the things that occur that cause us to have the greatest capacity issues at different points in time? If it's kittens, and we need those foster homes, then that's the time that communication needs to start. But there may also be other things that are not just communication. And we're saying that we would like to know what those things are, and to know that we are thinking about putting whatever the solution to that might be in place, or are there solutions? Because there may be smaller, lower cost things that we can do interim to help animals, to help our community, that are not just, throwing money at a building or housing or something like that.
things like the TNR program,
Mhm.
if we can get ahead of that and get the private landowners to agree to see things like that, that helps us on the downstream side.
And so if that's the root cause of our capacity issue
It's not-
at different points in time, that's what I'm getting at. What is the thing that is causing that problem and at our highest points?
Yeah. It's interesting because Donna and I have had those conversations of, sometimes if we pick up animals, we can kind of understand where are they coming from? Where is this a lost animal from this neighborhood? Are we seeing it kind of a repeated type of thing? If it is, maybe we ought to ramp up our public education for that neighborhood or this area of town.
Mhm.
And so we do some very quick analysis of that. I think some of the things I've heard so far is we get a lot of drop-offs in the city. Unfortunately, they come in from other areas. They just get dropped off here, and then they call us and tell us they're loose in this parking lot, and so we go pick them up. So we do get a lot of that. A lot of those tend to be breed specific, and so those tend to be harder to adopt out as well. And so I don't know how we can solve those regional type issues, but it's something that Dawn and her group are trying to figure out on. We got to respond. We are going to respond, but how can we increase the adoptions to help more, if you will? So there's things in the community that we need to be focused on, but things regionally we got to be
Absolutely.
focusing as well.
And I think when we are able to articulate some of those things when people are frustrated or complaining, when we can articulate why a certain condition exists or what the community needs to do to help, I think that will go far toward building bridges that will help.
Yeah, I
for
mean,
the
and it's
future.
very interesting, when you pick up lost animals or abandoned animals, you pick them up blindly. You don't know their medical history. We all like to think that they're on a regular treatment for heartworms and everything else. And unfortunately, sometimes the dogs that I've seen come through there and heard it, that come through there are in really, really bad medical shape. And the downside is some of that stuff is contagious to the healthy animals in the shelter. And so managing that is sometimes a big challenge. When it impacts our cat population, it has devastating effects. And so figuring out how can we better control those and manage those before it starts to impact the healthy pet population at the shelter. Those are big things for us.
And just
Challenges.
one last comment would be the spay and neuter, the low cost spay and neuter that's the most promising thing I've heard in this meeting today. I think that has the potential to be a very positive thing for many years to come.
Yeah, but no, I do want to thank everybody for coming out before I wrap up. And for everybody who's leaving, we do have a gift for you. Just let me know if it's a cat or a dog, because we can pair you up on the way out. No takers? Promise? That would really help us, please. Who wants two? No? No? All right, guys, thank you so much. You kind of see our challenges at the end of the day, so I appreciate it. Oh. Jillian.
Okay, we will now move on to item 3C. Jillian Henshaw will present.
I know you probably thought the meeting was over. I promise to make this short, but I just want to give some updates from the engagement side. Sometimes we hear comments in these meetings that we realize unless you're an active volunteer where you're in and out with us pretty frequently, you may have no idea what we're actually doing. Some of the different things that we're trying to do. So I'm going to go through a couple of these. I'm a visual person, so excuse the fancy side. So first, I'm going to kind of cover some of the things that happened last month. So this is a new year. So in February for this meeting, we're going to cover some of the things that happened in January and then looking forward into the next month as well. So we are starting to do small scale adoption events throughout the city at different businesses to attract people with different interests and personalities. So we began at Texas Leaguer. That was a brewery, and actually in December is when we started our first trial, and that was at Imperial Wine. Turns out a lot of people like to drink, also like animals, so that's wonderful. We ended up having 2 sleepovers. Benny's one on the left that was actually adopted. One of the things that I kind of committed to as the engagement coordinator is having monthly meetings with the volunteers. Fosters are welcome, of course, as well, but essentially rotating between a social aspect to strengthen the commitment volunteers feel to the shelter and one that is educational. So in the one for January, we did a trial for a training session. So it was more of an animal behavior. So we had a volunteer who is actually a trainer at PetSmart come out. That's Bowser showing off how he's such a good boy, and you can see some of our volunteers in the back. Ellen actually demonstrated for us that Bowser's one who he's a young German Shepherd and he jumps a lot. So how can we better as volunteers or dog walkers try to prevent that behavior that might prevent him from being placed in a forever home? So behavior is a big thing, especially when we have large dogs that aren't great on the leash, or people see that could prevent them from finding a forever home. So that's a goal of ours, is to try to fix or to better improve those behaviors. Another thing we did last month, we had Teresa Louise Photography. She actually is one of the employees at Creative Pet Clips, and she actually volunteered her time on a Sunday. I don't think she knew what she was getting into with shelter dogs versus the dog she's used to. But about 2.5, 3 hours later, we got nice photographs for Valentine's Day of all of the animals that we had on site, focusing on dogs because that's what we're currently over capacity on. If you haven't been there in a while, we actually don't have too many cats right now. This is Alexis, available for adoption. And then on the right, you'll see Cindy with our new official ambassador of Petopia, Bella, who you may have met before the meeting started. She's had an interesting journey. I have another slide about her, but she's also on a glow up for this year. So she's lost, I think, about 15 pounds so far. So she's an example to us all. Other successes, it's pretty typical for me to have easy placement for cats or even kittens. A lot of times I'll see foster fails because people can't ignore the little kittens. But sometimes we will have them come out of foster care because then they're just available for adoption. And so we had 7 new cats last month going to foster care, and then 6 of them are actually new placements. We had 3 in foster care for dogs and 2 are offsites at Pet Suites. If you follow us on Instagram or Facebook, that's a great way that you can engage with the shelter if you're not able to physically come be involved or volunteer. So yesterday I went to visit Jackie and Bogart, who are both at Pet Suites Longmeadow, and got to check up on them, see what their daily life looks like. And they're very lucky to have such a great, luxurious location. And then we had multiple animals exit foster care to find their forever home. I am volunteering to foster the one in the middle, Hope, who is available for adoption. Sometimes it's hit or miss for dogs because that's just a general issue. Like, people seem to be more willing to take kittens. And then on the right, one of our volunteers is actually helping us with newborn babies and a cat. And they are growing up, so they'll be available hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And so events for this month, adoption events, we currently have on Friday plans for Home to Hilton Stafford to use their dog park for a small scale adoption event. Again, going with that theme of trying different businesses throughout the region. This month as well, on the 15th, if you've not heard of the Children's Museum, we are participating in a citywide event Bella will be joining us. She's great with children. And so that'll be really fun for us to be in the vet portion of the Children's Museum to educate on not only general animal care, but animal behavior, because we see sometimes, even if you're volunteering at the shelter, little kids don't necessarily understand how to read animal behavior. And again, that can be an issue long-term where people may not be able to keep a pet if they are having little kids interact with pets inappropriately. And then again, Yappy Hour, it's going to be Share the Love. So this time we're going to go off-site. I'm still working on the date, but this will just be a social event for us again to share the enjoyment of the shelter. Social media. So this is something that actually was a huge learning curve for me in this position. Facebook had already existed for our shelter, but the Instagram was fairly new. And so that's kind of been a goal of mine, is that a lot of younger people like to use Instagram. It's a great way to try to connect people with their animals again, whether they lost them or they're looking for a new pet. And so we started with a really small following behind Instagram, and I'm working on increasing that. But I wanted to do a shout out. This puppy actually came back today from sleepover. His sleepover family's cat didn't care for him being a puppy. But long story short, he got more following from his post than we've had the entire time. So even though we only have 200 followers on Instagram, over 400 people liked his massage. He's a great puppy, available. He's there right now. So I just want to do a little shout out that if you follow any kind of social media, you're welcome to share our stuff at any point. And then some other updates. I did make a formal, it's a Microsoft form, and I have a flyer for it. So far, if you would like to request Bella to visit you for mental health, for other reasons, just because she's a good girl, we now have that shared with Fort Bend ISD. And then we're looking to begin sharing that with senior assisted living within the city as well. So Bella's soon going to be booked. The paparazzi will be after her. So you'll just have to get in line. I am her consultant now. So you'll have to send your request to me. Volunteers. So we actually do have quite a few volunteers, new volunteers and young volunteers, which may or may not be well known. And that's something that I have been working to organize, because a lot of times when we have newer or younger volunteers, they might show up at the shelter and they're like, I'm here to do enrichment, and they have no idea what that means. So what we started actually on Sunday for the first time, and I'm not sure how long, we have in-person orientation training for new volunteers now. And so the goal is to give them more confidence, but also to have the dedicated time to look at things and see, where am I going? What's appropriate? What is safe? And so I'm dedicating that time. Right now, we're offering it 3 times a month where they can become new volunteers, and that way they're confident and they know who to ask if they have questions. And for this past one on Sunday, we capped out, I'm starting with 8 people, and that's what we had, 7 of which were student age, high school student age. And they had great questions. We spent an hour and a half together, went through and did different things. And so that also is a good way to try to see commitment levels, not just people coming in for 2 hours and never showing up again. But if you're willing to join us for an hour and a half orientation, you're probably more likely to come back in the future as well. And then special projects, we are working with what we got. We're working to beautify some of our shelters. So you might see some of us have moved offices. I know in Whiskerville, we have started painting to make it a little more appealing on the eyes. And so the Fort Bend County Christian Academy behind us is dedicating their service project during spring break to come help us with some of that. So we'll have about 10 high school students for most of that week to assist us. So it's not just me painting. And then I believe in the next 2 weeks, Canes is coming to do a service project with us as well. We're starting to talk to a homeschool program, and then of course, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts as well. So kind of to wrap up the engagement side of things, we work with lots of different rescues. We actually had over 13 animals last month being transferred for different groups. Again, like Houston Hounds and Beagles, that's a pretty specific one. So sometimes they're open to different types of animals or more specific. We're also working on the website to better serve the community. So trying to make it more visually appealing, but also clearer. So for instance, if you are a new volunteer, having a landing page that will allow you to better understand next steps instead of just sending you off to the website to do the application. The wildlife, the fun, we really like watching our animal service officers when they come in with random animals. We've had multiple roosters. We had a hawk. We had a duckling, a couple ducklings. We had random eggs that were unidentified, possums, and more. So we don't actually take care of those. They'll go to Houston SPCA, but it's always exciting to see them try to wrangle some wildlife. And then wellness, we're also exploring options for supporting employee wellness. So whether that involves Bella or dog walking, we're not sure exactly, but we're starting those conversations. So thank you for your time and hopefully we'll have good updates next month as well. Don't know if you have, did you want to close that? Okay.
Now we will move on to item number 4, Director's Report. And Dawn Steph will deliver that presentation.
This will be short. Okay, so concerns were the TNR. I think we already addressed those in the earlier shelter operations update. And then we've already addressed the regionalization concerns. We continue to see and get questions asked, but that is an ongoing, like both of those are ongoing emails that I get asking about that. I did want to mention, a speaker mentioned the Reese Center partnership. So the city has a partnership with Reese Center already for fleet technicians. When we were creating that partnership, we did talk about the shelter. And at that time, they didn't have the program locally at the Reese Center. So we'll get with our innovation group to follow back up with them, because if they do have their vet tech program now in place and want to partner, we are open to partnering with them on that. So I will follow up with that with them internally in the city, but we're always looking at partnership opportunities. So anything that's brought forward, we will definitely investigate. Upcoming agenda topics, again, we'll continue updating on shelter operations, those policies and processes that we'll start to walk through the subcommittee. We'll be back on the next agenda item, next meeting agenda, and then going forward until we get those all reviewed. We will potentially have ordinance modifications. So that subcommittee will then be meet to talk about those ordinance modifications so we can get those inputted and corrected. Short and sweet. Any questions? Questions from the board? Sorry. Sorry.
Sorry. What about the operating hours? Can we, now that we're ramping up into spring, can we look into more accessible operating hours?
So the operating hours are strictly driven by staff capacity, right? So we would love to be open longer in after 5 or even longer on the weekends. We're having those internal conversations. I think in order to do that, we're going to have to ask for resources in the budget. And so that's what we're doing now, is we are talking about all of the issues that we have, the programs we want to implement that are going to require resources, so that we can ask for them in the budget process and continue to expand and grow and be open longer. But we don't have the capacity with the existing staff to cover more hours over 7 days a week, if that makes sense. But as we get capacity, we can.
How long does the budgeting process take?
So as Rob said, we just kicked it off last week. We will be going through, departments will be compiling their requests that will be reviewed, and then it gets filed in July. And then we have those budget workshop meetings in August, and then council approves it in September, and then it's implemented October 1. As we go through these conversations about needs and wants, as Rob said, I'm very vocal about asking for mid-year funding. So if there's something that we can ask for that would help us implement new programs or projects, we can ask for it mid-year. It's subjective to what's available in the budget. And we cannot, I don't know if it's by charter or whatever, you cannot add full-time employees outside of the budget process. So any new staffing would have to go through the budget process.
So the donation subcommittee or another private partnership could not
if there was
arrange to pay a salary?
So if there's a grant that pays for a person that we can apply for, we're open to looking at grants too, to have that. Any grant opportunity, actually. So we're absolutely open.
Okay, if you
having
could
that.
just, I think all of us here, if you could let us know what would be the cost to have an extra person or during the spring season. The community maybe could get together and try to figure something out.
So I guess I'll clarify. It's not just one person that you would need, because when it's multiple.
Yes.
So We will, but again, we are going to be looking at it for potential budget requests.
Okay.
And so as we formulate those and compile costs and the needs and the resources outside of just staffing, then we'll
Okay,
we'll
yeah,
be
if you could-
talking about it internally to try to get funding.
okay, great.
So
Dawn?
I have a
Oh.
kind of to add on to that in the past. We used to be open on Thursdays till 7 o'clock,
Mhm.
2 years ago, before things fell apart the first time.
Mhm.
And why can't we go back to that in terms of, since we did it before? And there was a great program that we incorporated with the community. That's when we had the Girl Scout reading program on
Mhm.
Thursdays, and the Girl Scouts came and read to the cats and the dogs, and we can't do that anymore. For a variety of reasons, that's a whole nother story, but having that time back, what did we cut back when we're opening to the public? I know the staff is still there, obviously working and getting paid and doing stuff. So we're open less to the public than we ever were, because instead of them coming at 8, they can't come till 10. And then on Mondays, they can't come at all. And we haven't compensated for that anywhere. So where's the discrepancy for what we were doing 2 years ago by having longer hours
Yeah.
and having the evening plus the Saturday, which we finally got back, but why can't it be like that again? And what's the holdup, or what's the philosophy, or whatever the right word
And
is?
now we're closed
So
at
I
4
think-
instead of
I
5.
think there's multiple factors that play into that. I think if you'll go back to Ellen's comment about we're operating better than we ever have before, it's because of those hours. It's because we're not burning out staff work. We're open 8 to 5. We have to do things before we open, and we have to do things after we open. And so in order to be open 8 to 5 to the public, a staff comes in before and they stay late, which then, a full-time person is supposed to work 40 hours a week. If I'm working staff overtime to extend hours, I'm going to burn them out, and then we're going to lose staff. And so I go back to Ellen's comment of, we're in a great place and we're accomplishing great things and taking great strides. Is it a goal? Absolutely. It is a goal to extend hours. I can't do it right now with the resources that we have, but a goal is to add resources, to add funding to do that. I don't want to force something and then be like, oh, this is not good. Staff is burnt out, calling in, like there's unhappiness, like our staff is happy. It's showing in how the animals are being treated. It's showing at the work that we're putting in to keep moving forward, to create new programs, do more things, partner with rescue groups. We're hitting all avenues that we've never had the time to do before. And so I don't want to reverse that progress, but 100%, like, yes, I would love to be open 7 days a week, 8 to 5, and have the staff to do that. And we will get there to have longer hours during the week or more hours on the weekend. Not right now.
I just think it needs to be a balance and a priority, and I totally understand. Yeah, it's great because you can work from 8 to 10, and when someone comes in at 10 o'clock when we're open, it smells nice because they're not coming in at 8 o'clock when the dogs
Nothing's
haven't
been
been
cleaned.
out overnight,
Yeah.
and it doesn't smell very good in the shelter
Yeah.
because that hasn't been cleaned. So there's definitely a benefit towards that adjustment. But
Yeah.
at the same time, you look at shelters around the country, and there are so many, and they're not necessarily municipal ones, but that are just open multiple nights a week till 7 or 8 o'clock. And that
Mhm.
there's got to be some kind of way that we can part-time staff and volunteers too, but just make it happen. And that needs to just, I don't know, be a priority. And I understand
it is.
everything
Yeah.
that it's great where we're at. But again, with the peak coming and the increase in animals, we've got to have a permanent plan in place for this period of time. And, we've always joked that, in Texas, we never have, it's always peak, because it's so warm
majority
in
of the
Southeast
year,
Texas. The
yes.
majority of the year we're at peak. even though,
Yeah.
At least for the cats right now, it's not showing in the numbers, but that just needs to be maybe, again, when we talk about
Mhm.
procedures and operating in that time, and that's those subcommittees talk about, okay, we need to plan to get there as quick as possible for these extended hours and extra staff so that we can manage the peak time, even, with our capacity for care limit of animals. But just so that we can do one more thing to try and move the animals out is by, making it more accessible to the public, but
Agreed. And I will say, if someone reaches out to us and says, hey, I want to come meet Bella, but I can't get there till 5:30 or 6, I know our staff is working with them to, okay, we're closed, but if you can come at this time, I'll wait and, be here. So we do make those accommodations when someone is interested and is going to come and wants to come. But yes, it is a priority and it will be looked at to add those resources to be able to do that.
so are we not doing PetSmart? Because that's another avenue where we did have pets.
PetSmart is cats 7 days a week, but we have very minimal cats right now. So we have not put cats at PetSmart. I don't know if we've done dog events at PetSmart. The one PetSmart we were at, they had another group that was coming with dogs, if I remember correctly, because, right? Is that right, Jillian? Or am I misspeaking?
Yeah, we used to take dogs.
We
regularly
did
on
used to take them
weekends.
and we were utilizing, we were at 3 different PetSmarts at one time. And I know through the incident last year, 2 of those locations identified other partners because we didn't respond because we were in the mix of trying to take care of our own house. And so we lost those 2 to be able to take dogs to, unless those groups don't bring animals that weekend. But I mean, Jillian is creating our own adoption events to get animals out there. And she's also doing part. So we're still looking at all avenues to expand those adoption opportunities throughout the region, even because we're even going to be in Stafford.
I will tell you regarding PetSmart, because I took dogs there every Friday for 8 or 10 years, every Friday. And over time, of course, it stopped at COVID, but the foot traffic in PetSmart was way down. And we would go through
That's not good.
the routine of taking 3 to 4 dogs every week. And then and when we drive them back, and staff wouldn't do it, and it was all volunteer. And it just wasn't really worth it anymore. So
The
I know-
online shopping world has reduced traffic.
Right.
I know I shop up for food online. Any other questions? Okay. Just a reminder, upcoming meetings, our next meeting is March 8th. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Brian.
Correct, here.
Okay, then if there are no other questions, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I make a motion that we adjourn. I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Barbara.